Here's my. Bear with us a moment, please. Okay. We'll get started shortly.
You know what I mean? Like you have to go behind the parking lot. And go by it. Yeah.
Welcome to the Town of Avon Advisory Plan Commission meeting. If you are interested in having a copy of the agenda, they are available on the tables to the right of the audience. We will be conducting business as outlined on the agenda. From time to time, the board may deviate from the agenda. As president of this body, I will inform those in attendance of any deviations. This meeting is being recorded for the public record. Because of this, we request that personal conversations are kept to a minimum and that all cell phones are kept to vibrate, or better yet, turned off. Any phone calls should be taken outside of the chambers. If you are interested in commenting during the public hearing portion of the commission's deliberations, please sign up on the sheets located on the tables to the right of the audience. When your name is called, please step forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please address your comments to the board and not to the staff or to the petitioner. Your comments should relate directly to the case at hand. During the conduct of the public hearing portion of the commission's deliberations, the petitioner will have 10 minutes to present their case to the commission. Remonstrators will have 10 minutes to present objections to the petition. Persons in support of the petition, other than the petitioner, will have 10 minutes to present support for the petition. Finally, the petitioner will close the public hearing portion of the presentation with a 5-minute rebuttal period. Once the public hearing is closed, no additional testimony will be heard unless it is solicited by members of the commission during the question and answer phase of the commission's deliberations. And I believe Mr. Peoples will be our timekeeper for that sort of thing, correct?
I'm right here.
All right. Responses to public comments and questions may be given once the public hearing portion is closed. We do understand that there may be several persons who wish to speak. In order to keep the meeting running in a timely fashion, we would request that you not repeat previous comments. Thank you for your assistance in facilitating a respectful, fair, and timely meeting. Again, welcome to our meeting. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And shall we take a quorum? Or
Catherine Ransford,
here?
Paul Mecklenburger,
Here.
Bill Reed, Greg Susan, present. Mason Pike, absent. Dave Goffman, here. And Jennifer Spencer. Here. Do we have a quorum?
We have a wonky speaker someplace. We'll just have to figure it out. We have a quorum. Okay, very good. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the previous meeting minutes, and are there any proposed edits or changes or questions about it? If not, then I will take a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Very good. We're now moving on to the public comments portion. This is the time at which anybody who is present can speak to anything that is not on tonight's agenda. If it's relating to tonight's agenda, we'll wait until we get to those items. However, if you want to speak to something about that's not on tonight's agenda, this is your opportunity to do it. So would anyone like to speak about something that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay, no one's stepping forward. The public comments hearing is closed. Do we have any requests for continuances or agenda modifications? All right, moving on. Our first item is old business, DPR 23-1.
DPR 23-01, Harvest Landing Lot 4. This is a request for approval of a development plan petition to approve a new 7,000 square foot retail center with a waiver of section 2.1002A of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow fiber cement siding to be considered masonry as it applies to the masonry requirement for buildings in Tier 1 of the US Highway 36 Overlay District. So this was heard last month, and we did get through the public hearing portion of it. Well, we got through the staff's presentation, and then the petitioner started, and then the Plan Commission had a number of questions, and they continued it to this meeting to get through, so the petitioner had an opportunity to answer those questions. There is a significant land use history associated with the Harvest Landing commercial subdivision. These are the two variances most recently approved that apply directly to this lot. And that deals with the parking, the number of parking rows between US 36 and the front of the building, and the front setback, maximum front setback of 125 feet that's established in this overlay district. Both of those variances were approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Location is down here. This location right here and right here. It's, I think that this that might be the fuel center. And then there's a chicken restaurant and then the Costco right up there. It is zone C2 and it's in Tier 1 of the US 36 Overlay District. As you heard, it's a request to construct a 7,000 square foot building for a multi-tenant retail center. It also includes a waiver of the provision of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow for fiber cement siding to be considered as a masonry towards a requirement that 80% of the structure be clad in masonry. The definition of masonry in Chapter 10 of the ordinance excludes fiber cement siding. So when we're reviewing these development proposals for compliance with that 80% requirement, we cannot include fiber cement siding. In this particular instance, the petitioner uses Nichihau panels, which are a fiber cement product. The request as proposed is consistent with the Unified Development Ordinance and everything except for the three things that are shown up there on that bullet point. And as I said earlier, the Board of Zoning Appeals has approved variances of two of those. So the only thing really up for review by the Plan Commission at this time is the masonry requirement and the use of Nichihau. The intent behind that particular provision of the ordinance and the exclusion of masonry material is to allow the Plan Commission to do a case-by-case study on the use of fiber cement siding. The intent, of course, is to have durable and attractive facades in the overlay. And so the use of fiber cement does encourage the durability. The multi-tenant retail center that's being proposed is very, very similar to the one that's on Lot 7, which is a pretty attractive building. It's got First Watch and the chicken salad chick and a pizza restaurant in it. And It's going to be very similar, nearly identical to that building. And it's attractive building, and the town has received several phone calls on that building. This is the general site layout of the proposal. Building is right here. It's about a 3-tenant space building. This is how the building will appear. This isn't the color elevation. The petitioner has submitted color elevations, and this is how the building will appear on the site. This is from the front up here. This is from the back right here. Showing you the different portions of the building, how it's clad. If the Nichiha panels were considered masonry, the building would be 100% masonry. But because it's not, it's considered technically about 30% masonry with about 60-some% in the Nichiha panels here. We do recommend that the Plan Commission approve that waiver request. The building is an attractive building, and it's durable. The staff does recommend approval of this DPR, subject to the 3 conditions outlined on our staff report and on the slide up in front of you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
I have a few questions. Because you brought this up, I just want to make sure, any previous decision by the Plan Commission doesn't set a precedent?
No.
Is that correct?
No, it's a case-by-case issue.
Okay,
Yeah.
just want to make sure that we understand that. And then when you reference the other construction where Chicken Salad Chick and other businesses are at, what's the coverage of cement board on that building compared to your masonry product?
It's very similar to this.
I didn't think it was over
Yeah.
50%.
Well, I think the sides don't have so the front is very similar. I think the front has a little bit more brick on it because it's a longer facade. So the front has a lot of Nichiha on this because of the short facade. They don't have a lot of brick underneath the area. That building is a lot longer, so it's got some brick towards the middle and then down in the little tenant spaces down underneath. So it has more brick on the front facade of the one on lot 7 than this one does. The front facade on this one is largely the Nichiha panels.
Okay, because I'm bringing this up because when you mentioned that I thought when we had originally approved that, it wasn't fiber cement board, it was actually a wood product.
Yes, it was. It was a wood product. And then there was a lot of discussion at that time about the wood and the concern that it would degrade in time. And so when the petitioner came back after the Plan Commission approved the waiver, they requested that it be changed to a Nichiha type use, and I administratively approved that.
And the reason I asked that is because I don't think we approved that wood product because it was over 50%. It was less than 50%. I thought it was, I'm pretty sure it was not 50%.
Yeah, I could get the file if you want me to try to find the exact.
It may be as we get into the discussion, I just want to make sure that, I just want to check on that because I don't think it's similar in coverage. It may be similar in product.
Yeah, the front facade has more Nichiha on this building than the lot 7 building.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I have a question that I asked last month as well. I guess the ordinance, trying to understand the intentions of the ordinance, you had some more verbiage around it this month on basically saying it's supposed to look, you're trying to get it to look good and be durable.
Right.
So when they say they want 60% masonry, there is no piece of that that's saying there's an intent to look like masonry. Because the concern I have is that fiber cement is intended to look like wood. So is the intent to look like masonry, or is the intent to just be more durable and look a certain way?
Reading into I think that there is a preference to brick and stone in the ordinance. That's the preference in the ordinance, and it's specifically, in fact, when they talk about masonry material, the ordinance specifically has brick, stone, and other masonry material approved by the Plan Commission. So I think a part of it is to present a durable and attractive facade, but the other one is to encourage the use of brick and stone.
So that from that perspective, this doesn't meet that.
This wouldn't
that
meet
one.
that. No, this wouldn't
So
meet.
that was what I wanted to.
Right,
clarify.
yeah, this one, the facade would look more like a cladding with like siding rather than brick and stone.
You brought up in the staff report, which, as always, our staff reports are excellent and well done. But you brought up that the intent behind not allowing fiber cement siding to be considered a masonry material was because the town wanted to be able to take this on a case-by-case basis, not because they wanted to completely eliminate fiber siding. Is that correct?
That's a way, so there was some debate when we were, we had proposed originally on the UDO to allow fiber cement siding. And there was a lot of discussion, at least maybe at the council level, I think also at the plan commission level, that they didn't want to sort of blanket approve a fiber cement siding process, but they didn't want to totally discourage it. They wanted to be able to look at it on a case by case basis for this, for cases like this.
Bill, they're referencing lot 7, which is the one that you identified as the chicken salad chick. Was that building pre-UDO change or?
That was approved under the old ordinance. The 36, there were some changes, but nothing really, there were some changes from the US 36 overlay in the previous zoning ordinance to the 36 overlay in the current Unified Development Ordinance. But the provisions that deal with percentages of masonry and the architectural standards were basically carried straight forward through. So they're basically identical.
And on a, where did I see this here? They indicated that the south elevation or the front facade is the only one that's they're asking for the fiberboard for?
No, all 4 facades have the fiber cement siding. Can I get that back up?
So their comment here, the waiver request is for building facade only.
Right, all 4 of the all 4.
Okay, I'm looking at the
Elevations.
south facade, but they're asking for all 4 facades.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And they break down the material calculations on that, showing the
Right.
different percentages on all of them.
Bill, did they happen to bring in a sample of the fiber cement board?
I think they may have. I don't know if they brought it in. No, they haven't.
So you haven't seen the actual?
I've seen it. Well, yeah, they brought it. I want to say they brought it when they filed. No, I'm sorry. They brought it in when they changed the facade on lot 7. They brought it in, what they proposed.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, Mr. Taylor, we are first considering a waiver, which is entirely up to the board as to whether or not we want to grant. And after that, we would be doing the approval, which has to be, which if it meets all the requirements of the ordinances, must be approved, correct?
Yes, and yes.
Okay. Just trying to make sure everybody understands how our process works here, so. Any more questions for staff? Okay, with that, I would ask the petitioner to come forward.
Hi, Dylan Reynolds, the civil engineer with Spaceco. On behalf of the petitioner and the developer, I have brought with me Jason Miller from Ovalis, the architect on the project. So if anyone has more specific questions architecturally, he'll be the one to answer for you.
Just state your address, please.
Office address is 3850 Priority Way, South Drive, Suite 110, Indianapolis.
Thank you.
Jason Miller, Ovalis, 5253 West 16th Street, Speedway, Indiana.
And I don't believe we have much to add other than The board had asked for color renderings and the material calculations, so I don't think we have much to add, but would be happy to answer any questions.
I'm curious as to the reason that you'd want the waiver instead of just meeting the ordinance and making it masonry.
Sure. The intent for this development was to have a cohesive design for all the B shops, the multi-tenant buildings, so that they would look similar to each other versus having multiple different looking buildings on a single development as Harvest Landing. We're kind of looking at it as kind of like a decor in your home where everything kind of matches, and then you have your QSRs, your independent retail buildings, the fast food restaurants is kind of like the splash of color, if you will. But the B shops, we wanted it to be all cohesive, the same type of building design, especially along the tier 1 of the US.
So when the original buildings were requested, why ask for a waiver then? Why not, pick a design that matches the ordinance?
We felt the design other than masonry was limited. We wanted something that looked more aesthetic for the neighborhood, and the Nichiha and the wood paneling kind of added that splash that we needed then versus all masonry, be it brick.
Or 60%.
Right.
So you had 40% to work with.
Right. And I think everybody would agree that the Harvest Landing Lot 7 building does look very, very nice.
So just,
Thank you.
if I'm looking at the renderings right here, the south face is what is all Nichiha that be facing US 36?
No, we added a section of the Nichiha to give that frontage elevation to Charles Nelson Drive. We couldn't quite fit 2 corner units like we did on Harvest Landing along. So we put a little bump out to kind of give that bump in aesthetics to that frontage.
Okay, so maybe just so I understand, if we could have the renderings, I'm trying to figure out what's facing US 36 and what's facing Charles Nelson Drive.
Sure. Yeah, the top left is the front elevation that has the recess with the lighting that uplights, just like Harvest Lot 7. The only difference is we couldn't, because of the length, it looked really weird to separate like Harvest Landing Lot 7 with brick in between the 2 tower elements. So we just extended the fascia across and added just a cap to the top of that, which is recessed, that has uplighting.
And does that face 36 or Charles Nelson Drive?
That faces US 36. So it is basically just, it's a corner section of the 15,000 square foot Harvest Lot 7. You're just not seeing the continuation of brick and then the other corner element of Harvest Landing 7.
So so all the brick is in the sides and the rear of the building.
Correct. The light color is the brick, which is the same brick that's on Lot 7.
Okay. And did you happen to bring a sample of the Nichiha siding with you?
I unfortunately did not know.
Okay. And I don't know, because we've talked about this before, if we get materials that are different than what we have, can you ask the petitioner to bring materials? It'd be nice to see what you're proposing as new materials, even though we drive by the other building probably every day.
Right, and my apologize. We had submitted it to the zoning department early in the process, and we
Okay.
just thought it would be part of the records.
That's fine. Thank you.
Any
What's the
further
wear and tear durability of the Nietzsche board versus brick?
They're both cement products, so there's really, according to Nichiha or any of the fiber cement manufacturers, they're of the same durability and the same classification as masonry.
Any further questions for the petitioner? Okay, we will open it up to public comment. Is there anybody present who would like to speak as to this agenda item? Since no one is coming forward, public comment on this agenda item is closed. Discussion.
Well, pertaining to the waiver, I mean, we've seen fiber cement board here, and I think it maybe is a future discussion on what I have that, especially if we look at this as, to approve this, maybe we ought to start looking at it as considered masonry product or set some standards around that. But, you know, when you look at the design, it's similar to the other building, which, you know, said is aesthetically pleasing. So, and the developer at that time moved away from wood to fiber cement for durability. And I think we had extensive conversations on the durability last time we looked at this or we reviewed something. So it is durable product as far as we know. So.
And we had I seem to remember that we had a long conversation about the aesthetics of it. Fiber cement board is not your father's fiber cement board. It's a lot more attractive now, and I think it used to be considered something that was cheap and not something you would want on a building, but those days are gone, if I recall the conversation correctly. Any further comments, questions?
My only concern still is the intent of the ordinance and the look. That's the only comment I have, is that it says they're suggesting that they want it to look like masonry, not wood. So I continue to be kind of hung up on that.
I agree with Paul that we may be getting to the point where fiber cement board needs to just go ahead and be counted as masonry, even though the whole point of not including it was so that it could be done on a case-by-case basis. We seem to be,
I don't think they're the same look-wise from a look perspective. So it just depends on if that's what the discussion is from a look perspective. I don't think they're the same thing.
Steve, I don't disagree with you, and it seems like the fiber cement board previously has been used as an accent to the masonry, not the majority of the coverage of the building. And here, it's the majority as opposed to the masonry being the accent component. And that's where, okay, the fiber cement board would be an alternative to brick and stone. Here, it's like brick and stone are used to accent that
Right.
niche board.
Right, and you got 40% to work with, you know, if you wanted to use the Nietzsche board. I don't know what the old ordinance was as far as, was there more flexibility in that discussion because of the wording of the old ordinance? Did they not have the footnote that specifically said we're excluding fiber cement from being considered masonry? I'm not sure. I wasn't part of that discussion, so I don't know.
okay, I don't think it's me.
Well, I agree with the petitioner, though. It does break up the monotony of all those. I mean, you do have brick with Swenson's and Raising Cane and Costco fuel station, and then you've got the like building to the other side of it. So it kind of breaks up the monotony, and then you've got Bubba's 36 or 33 there, so I'm fine with it.
I do like the idea that the multi-tenant buildings all have a similar look. You know, when you have the freestanding buildings that have their own corporate designs that they use, it's nice to know that the multi-tenants have a consistency to them. So I don't have a problem with this waiver myself. Any further discussion? Like to entertain a motion?
Make a motion. I move we approve the waiver of section 2.10.0.2.a of the Unified Development Ordinance to allow fiber cement siding to be considered masonry as it applies to the masonry requirement for buildings in Tier 1 of the US Highway 36 overlay district associated with DPR 23-01 Harvest Landing Lot 4.
Second.
Having had a motion and a second, we can now take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4,
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Mason Pike, is absent. Dave Kaufman,
Against.
Jennifer Spencer. Motion carries.
and having approved the waiver, we can now move on to the approval of the development plan. Is that correct, Mr. Taylor? Okay. So we've now had, I believe, a total of 3 waivers that have been approved for this. So now we are moving on to the development plan. Development plan, as we mentioned earlier, if it meets the requirements of the ordinances, must be approved. I believe we are at the spot where the plan has met the requirements of all the ordinances with the waivers. Is there any further discussion on approval of the development plan for Harvest Landing?
Make a motion you ready for a motion?
Yes,
Okay.
ready?
I move that we approve DPR 2301 Harvest Landing Lot 4, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report on file.
I'll second.
Having heard a motion and a second, we can go forward with a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4,
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now move on to new business, which is Oak Groves.
Map P 2302 Oak Groves. This is a request for approval of a major subdivision primary plat to develop a residential housing community containing 34 lots. It's an 11.02 acre property and located approximately 270 North County Road 900 East. There is a little bit of history associated with this one. Last year, a zoning amendment petition was filed. It went about 2/3 of the way through the process and was ultimately withdrawn. That rezoning petition would have rezoned this from R2 to R4 to allow the development of 110 two-story townhome units. There was some significant remonstrance to that petition, and the petitioner ultimately withdrew it. This is the location of the property, this L-shaped piece of property. This is the Costco, so this is just north of the lot 4 that you've seen earlier in this meeting. There is a church located right here on this piece of property. Single-family residential development abuts the property right here, commercial here, and then this is 900, and this is the Satori Point PUD, which I believe is a hospital and the YMCA and stuff back and over here. Again, this is a request for a subdivision of this property into 34 single-family lots. That's a gross density of about 3.08, 3.1 units an acre, and the property is zoned R2. The current Unified Development Ordinance does allow for what's called enhanced architectural standards for single-family dwellings and to qualify for enhanced lot standards. So if they build a higher quality structure on the lots, they are able to get some breaks from the ordinance standards. In this particular case, the maximum density increases from 3 units an acre, which is the standard for the R2 district, to 4 units an acre. They decreased the lot sizes from 12,500 square feet to 7,200 square feet, and they reduced the minimum lot width from 80 square feet to 60 feet at the setback line. There's also a reduction in the side yard setback that typically is not reviewed during platting. That's something that you get to in the building permit process. and that goes from 7 feet to 6 feet. Petitioner has utilized the density bonus, but at 3.08 units an acre, it's literally like 1 unit over what the R2 district would normally allow by right. And it's well under the 4 units an acre that are permitted by the ordinance. On almost all of the lots, the petitioner has utilized both the lot area and lot width bonuses in the ordinance, with most of the lots having about a 60-foot width and a 7,200 square foot lot area. To qualify for that, the petitioner submitted 9 proposed models for review under the enhanced architectural standards. There were 3 models, and each model had 3 different versions of it. Those were reviewed by the staff, and of those submitted, all could be used on any lot within the subdivision. They all comply with the requirements of the ordinance. They hit the 12 points. During the process of this, staff requested that the petitioner provide an asphalt trail along the southern edge of the right-of-way of the proposed public street from County Road 900 East to the east-west connector that would eventually connect to a trail loop that's within the Satori Point Plan Unit development. In lieu of a concrete sidewalk, the petitioner had some concerns with that, dealing with the location of their infrastructure and so on. The petitioner has proposed a trail along County Road 900 East that's consistent with the requirements of the trail plan, and a small trail segment from the proposed sidewalk into the Satori Point PUD trail. But they do retain the concrete sidewalk along the southern edge of the right-of-way of the public street. Originally, I've been discussing this with the petitioner most of the afternoon, or back and forth with emails and so forth. We originally would like to have retained that asphalt trail because what we were hoping for is that it wouldn't confuse people who are coming in to the subdivision to get to the Satori Point Trail if they were walking or doing other sorts of things. So they would be able to follow a trail all the way into the Satori Point Plan Unit development. Because of the way sidewalks are constructed with buildings and some of the issues associated with mobilizing it, the petitioner had some concerns with it. And so we have been discussing with them sort of like a compromise position on this one. It's important to note that what the ordinance requires is a 5-foot sidewalk. So what the staff is asking for is actually above what the ordinance requires. And so it's not something necessarily that we can impose. It's just something that we would like to have as an amenity for the public. The proposed revised plan, the plat that you have before you, is consistent with the standards of the Unified Development Ordinance. And this is the layout. Access from 900 going through, cul-de-sacing through right here. As I said earlier, the large number of lots are all meets the standards of the ordinance as far as the enhanced standards. Where it differs are this sort of lots right here at the cul-de-sac bulb, which are larger. They all essentially meet the R2 district standards by right. These lots right here do not use the enhanced architectural standards, but most of the rest of them, with the exception of that one, most of the rest of them are about 7,200 and 60 feet wide. Now these lots right here are probably about 60 feet wide as well at the setback line, but the lot size is consistent with the R2 district standards. We do recommend approval of this plat. We do suggest 5 conditions. The first one is standard for any of these enhanced architectural standards, and that is we delineate which of the elevations they can use, in this case, the Lincoln, Madison, and Coolidge elevations. And here's the compromise. Instead of the 5-foot sidewalk, the petitioner has proposed a 6-foot colored concrete path substituted with the 5-foot concrete sidewalk from County Road 900 East to the east-west connecting trail into the Satori Point PUD. So instead of an 8-foot asphalt path, we're asking for a 6-foot colored concrete path. That would still give the ability for the general public to realize they're sort of still on a trail. Revised plan shall comply with all commitments and conditions noted as part of any approval granted. The project shall receive any necessary review and approval by Crossroad engineers on behalf of the town, the Hendricks County Surveyor's Office, and the Hendricks County Drainage Board, which I don't think they need anything from either of those. And the final plat shall comply with all relevant portions of the Unified Development Ordinance and the Town Code. It should be noted on number 4 there, the petitioner, the engineering Crossroad is a little bit concerned, but they have addressed the concerns that Crossroads had with an outlet point. I don't know if Greg is here or is Crossroad here? Couldn't make it. We did receive an email from him earlier today that he's comfortable with the plans as they are, that they will need some work through the secondary plat process. But he's comfortable going forward with these the plans as they were amended on the 23rd of this month. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So this is same petitioner, but a completely different development plan, correct? For this is the same petitioner, but we have a completely different proposal, correct?
From the rezoning?
Yes.
No, it's totally different position.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood.
No, that was just a rezoning for a townhome development that was done by one of the local production builders.
Okay.
This is a totally different petition.
And this would be a rental home community, is that right? Is that
I believe so, yes.
what I thought I saw?
But what we're asking here, this is not a rezone, correct?
No, it's a subdivision plat.
Bill, could you show the neighborhood again and point out where the trail,
Now, I was looking in the files for an electronic copy. So along 900, right here in the right of way, there'll be a 8-foot asphalt, probably 8 to 10-foot asphalt path.
Okay.
And I believe right about here, the petitioner proposes, it might be 1 or 2 down, and somewhere right around here. They want to put an asphalt path from the sidewalk into Satori Point Planned Unit Development. The area that the staff was concerned with was this area, the sidewalk on the south side from the path, the trail that would be right here into the Satori Point Planned Unit Development, so that the citizens who are walking on the trail would know that they could come in here to get to Satori Point. That's really what we want.
so that's where the path would be, that
Right.
colored cement.
So there would be, instead of the 8-foot asphalt path here, what the petitioner proposes is a 6-foot wide colored concrete path that's been signed as that it's a trail.
Okay.
And the town is fine with that compromise.
I also, you'd mentioned this, but having to read the staff report, I was concerned that that the engineer's concerns hadn't been addressed yet.
Yeah, the petitioner submitted revised plans, I believe, on the 23rd of last week, Wednesday or Thursday of last week. And Crossroad did, and I should have printed out that email. Crossroad did review those plans, and they were comfortable with going forward and get primary plat approval at this hearing. They did tell the petitioner that he's got some work to do. What was missing that was causing a lot of the concern was an outlet point for the drainage.
Right.
And they have included an outlet point in the current set of plans.
So I'm keying in on the comfortable versus is good with the plan. So not totally, can you help me understand the difference between the review now and the secondary review?
Well, so this is the primary review. Normally what we get is a preliminary drainage plan.
Right.
And so we're looking at some key points. And the one main point that was missing with this particular one was an outlet point. All right, they sort of had a drainage scheme. That scheme was going towards the pond. but they didn't really show how that pond was going to outlet. They've amended those plans to show that outlet point, and they've amended their drainage report to address a lot of the concerns that Greg has. But when we get into the secondary approval, then we start looking at all the details of it. So we're actually going to start looking at elevations of, inlets and slope on pipes and size of pipes and those sorts of things. So the engineering firm is comfortable with going forward because they've included the outlet on the amended plans.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, because we do hear a lot about concerns about drainage, and especially I think on 900 and that. So Greg is comfortable with what he has received by the 23rd, that at this time, he doesn't have concerns about drainage.
No, yeah, he doesn't have concerns about drainage. He's comfortable that the detailed plan, when we get to secondary approval, will comply with the ordinance.
Okay.
Without that outlet, it didn't comply with the ordinance, and he was going to have us request a continuance of this petition.
So in his response then, you're referencing here this letter dated March 17th, 3D, he's highlighted, as well as then 5, 6, and 7. In his email to you then, he's identified that he's comfortable with those items.
Yes. He hasn't issued a amended report yet, showing how the revised plans done the 23rd have addressed those concerns, but he did provide an email to us stating that he's comfortable going forward with it at this time and getting primary approval and then reviewing the details during secondary approval process.
Now, if I recall correctly, when we were here before, the big issue, or one of the big issues, was having a separate entrance for safety vehicles.
Yeah.
But this particular plan does not require a second entrance because there are fewer lots, is that correct?
Yes, because the ordinance requires a second means of ingress and egress if it goes above 49 lots. And so at 34 lots, it doesn't meet the threshold for a second means of ingress and egress into the subdivision.
Okay.
I recall when we had that other proposal come in, there was a recommendation that this area be a transitional area, which you talked about townhomes being a good candidate for that.
Yeah.
This now being essentially the equivalent of a single family home, except for they're rented. How does that, I'm just kind of curious what the feeling is on that as far as the transitional.
Well, we have, I mean, from a transitional perspective, a single family development up against a commercial development isn't the best. But it is consistent with the zoning. I mean, that's what it's zoned. I mean, we prefer to have like a low intensity C2 or even an R4 and R5. I think from a planning perspective, that makes more sense because you're transitioning the single family to the north through this site into the heavier intensity commercial to the south. Obviously, the perfect course of action was the way it was historically used, and that's as a religious use. The religious uses, schools, government uses, multifamily, low intensity commercial, like an office use or a assisted living facility. Those are all perfect candidates for transitional uses. In this particular instance, so it's zoned R2, so a single family residential use is permitted by zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Because there's a single entrance, is the entrance a boulevard type entrance then for safety purposes?
I don't believe so, no, and the ordinance wouldn't necessarily require it so the ordinance, the way the ordinance is written, it would require it. You have sort of like this option between 50 and 75 where you could put a boulevard entrance, well, anything below 75 you could or couldn't. But above 75, you do have to put a boulevard entrance because there's only 34 lots. They're not required to put a boulevard entrance into the development.
Thank you.
Any further questions for staff? There not being any further questions, we ask the petitioner to come forward. And please state your name and address.
Good evening, my name is Matt Price. I'm an attorney with Denton's on behalf of AMH Development. Should pick me up now? There you go. Matt Price, on behalf of AMH Development. I'm an attorney with Denton's with an address of 10 West Market Street, Indianapolis, Indiana. Yeah, thank you, Bill. Looks like we may be pulling up the remonstrance program, which we'll hear next. Let me introduce my team while we're getting our PowerPoint pulled up. I've got Mark Connor and Gary Carpenter here this evening with me from AMH Development. Both of them have worked very closely with staff in connection with this proposal. We also have our engineering team, Jerry Kittle and Zachary Wilkinson from Innovative Engineering here. And Mark, Gary, the engineering team, and myself are all available to answer any questions that you have. Bill did an excellent job of explaining kind of the procedural posture of our matter, which is the property is zoned R2. We're using it for an R2 use. We're not seeking any waivers, any variances, or anything inconsistent with either the Unified Development Ordinance in Avon or the Subdivision Control Ordinance, which is a part of that ordinance. In fact, we like to believe that we're actually exceeding the requirements of the ordinance in a couple of important respects, which I'll address for you. So this is, again, kind of a snapshot of the proposal. In total, 34 lots. It takes advantage of a very creative provision in the Unified Development Ordinance that has to do with if you enhance the architecture, you can get a slight bump in the number of units that can be developed on a particular parcel by shrinking the lot widths and reducing some of the setbacks as well as the lot area. As Bill mentioned, the way that we're using that enhancement feature results in essentially one more home site than would otherwise be permitted under the base zoning. Another key feature of the project that Bill also noted, which I thought was important, is that up in the northwest corner of the site, around the cul-de-sac, while the lot widths themselves are reduced, the area of the lots is consistent with the base zoning for R2, and that's to match up better with the home sites for the existing subdivision that borders the project in that one small area. So we exceed the architectural standards, maintain the density essentially equivalent to the base level, and then match up well with the property to the northwest. With regard to the pathway issue, I just wanted to reiterate we are 100% amenable to the asphalt path along County Road 900, which would then connect to a pathway that would extend from the eastern border of our property west to a connection point between lots 18 and 19, which is right up in the upper, see here, right up in here. Then we'll connect to the fitness path or fitness trail at Satari Point. So providing excellent access across this parcel for people who want to traverse in either direction. As Bill mentioned, the only thing that is required is a 5-foot sidewalk, but as was explained to us, the town wanted to have a better, I think, identification of the connecting trail, if you will, as being available and open to the public. And so the compromise we offered was to increase the width of the sidewalk somewhat to 6 feet, but to maintain it as concrete and use a colored concrete to better demarcate the availability of that sidewalk for the public's use and not just the use of the individual neighborhood. And that facilitates our construction. We think it's a more aesthetically pleasing approach to the project. We're investing a lot in the architecture of these homes. These are very nice homes. And we think it matches up better and kind of balances the respective interests between the very reasonable request to have a readily identifiable pathway, while also kind of having it fit in with the overall neighborhood context. And so that's our kind of compromise approach, which we understand has been reviewed by staff and is acceptable to them. With regard to the entrance point right here, as Bill mentioned, we're not proposing a boulevard entrance, but we are prepared to do and agreeable to an emergency access drive between lots 2 and 3, where we would, it's kind of that mixture of turf and cementitious material that provides kind of a firm pathway for emergency response vehicles to be able to enter the property if there was some issue with access onto County Road 900. Again, not required, but kind of a belt and suspenders approach to providing continual access to the property for emergency response purposes. A couple other things I'll mention. We have more than double the amount of required open space, another aspect of the way the project exceeds the overall standards within the ordinance. With regard to the drainage questions, I just wanted to touch upon briefly. I think the primary question that the reviewer had was just confirming that we did have an outlet for our stormwater, and we were able to provide detailed information about how our project would interface with the Costco drainage system to the south, which our research showed, and the information we were able to provide to the reviewer demonstrated that the Costco development actually contemplated capturing the stormwater from this parcel to the north, and was effectively oversized in contemplation of that stormwater system. And it has a series of ponds along the southern edge of its development, which you can see there today and are functioning quite well, even with the very heavy rainfalls we've had over the last several days or last couple of weeks. And so that's why the reviewer was comfortable moving forward with our drainage plan, and our project fits in very nicely with that overall proposal. So just to reiterate, we meet all the standards in the ordinance. We're not seeking any waivers. We have been before the town before on a couple of rezoning requests that obviously were not decided the way we would have liked to have seen them decided. But we are committed to Avon. The need for housing in Avon continues. And this provides 34 new quality home sites for our customer base, which is primarily made up of 3 kind of spheres, if you will, just so you have some background on who the company serves. We serve a lot of individuals who are seeking to age in place, empty nesters, if you will, who would like kind of a low or nearly no maintenance option as a home site. And so a rentable home where you have maintenance provided by a company with a presence here in Indianapolis is a good option for older residents. It's also a good option for those who are in career transitions, moving to the area or moving from elsewhere in the country to Avon for job opportunities. And it gives a place to land in a great community with a great school system, and a town that offers restaurants, amenities, parks, obviously being right next door to Satori Point, and the fitness trail are draws for those seeking a high quality of life. And that's what makes this kind of pocket neighborhood so attractive. And then thirdly are just individuals who are seeking to rent for their own personal reasons, just prefer that. And as you might expect, that segment of the demographic that seeks out this company for a housing option is growing as we all kind of watch interest rates. Many folks have decided that they'd like to pause and wait, kind of see what happens with the marketplace before they decide to buy. And this provides a nice landing spot in a rentable option in a new home. And so this neighborhood will help meet the needs of each one of those segments of the population who seek out this housing option. So for all those reasons, we respectfully request your approval tonight. I did want to say also a word of thanks just in working with the staff. We've appreciated the ability to have an open dialogue about the site and to reach appropriate compromises that serve the community and also allow a very much needed and attractive development to move forward. Thank you.
Questions for the petitioner?
Couple things while we're there, just to clarify that path. You're saying between lots 18 and 19. When I read in here, they were talking lots 23 and 24. I'm assuming lots 23 and 24 is not accurate? Okay.
I think it is 18 and 19, Mr. Susan. It's kind of up in the,
Right. And that's
I think
what
it's
you got
right here.
They submitted their.
Okay.
revised plans.
And then the common area that is up front, is that a green space or is that a pond that where your drainage you were talking about will go to?
Yeah, that's part of our stormwater collection system.
Okay.
Yep.
So you mentioned an emergency access point that we hadn't discussed, and I just noticed on the plans here. So with that point, then you'd be willing to have that added as a condition?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yep.
And with that, do you need an easement then from the church to the north because you're going to come in their driveway, correct? To that access point?
Yeah, we've had conversations and can do that as part of that conditional approval. Yeah.
What does that do to the size of those two lots?
It would just be an easement, so it doesn't affect the lot width or make it fall below the minimum area.
Well, but if you put it in, obviously the space has to come from someplace.
Right. It's like a pathway or easement, so it doesn't change the fee ownership of the lot or the size of the area of the lot. It's just a space that's reserved if it was ever used for that purpose for a vehicle to traverse through there, like a drainage or utility easement, same concept.
Okay,
Those are included in the lot areas as well.
I'm stating my question wrong.
Yep.
So the actual space, I mean, how wide did we say it was 20 feet?
I think it is. Jerry, you want to come on up?
Good evening. Jerry Kittle with Innovative Engineering. Address is 3962 North Prairie Boulevard. What we have there is we have 30 feet. I've met with Fire Marshal to come up with this plan to come up with an alternate way that we could have emergency vehicles in and out for secondary access. That area that this pavers would be over to support an 80,000-pound fire truck is also a storm sewer easement. So we'll have a storm sewer within that same area. So this was an area that would be denoted for drainage as well. So the lots on each side are a little wider to accommodate the need for the square footage. So that's the reason that area was chosen. And we have worked with the church in order to get their agreement.
So that's not going to impact the setbacks or anything
It will
like that?
not.
Okay.
One other question then, I guess, is that gated then or not? Or what happens if somebody wants to drive through it right now?
We talked to the farm, or I talked to the fire marshal on that. He was not concerned that if we had to have a gate, it was not his requirement. If we chose to put a gate there, he would require that we put a Knox box on that. But this time we haven't talked about those details. Obviously, that's something as we go forward, if permitted, during the secondary plat, tech review, construction plans, we'll have more detail to talk about that.
So if I understand the pavers right, these would be open, it would have grass growing between them, so it really wouldn't look like a street.
Correct. Correct. It's an area that basically your EMS knows about. It's not advertised as general public. We really don't want the general public entering or exiting this. They're large blocks that they lay in the ground. They infill them with sand and in a compactable material, and then grass is sown and grass fills over those areas.
Any further questions for the petitioner?
Just on his primary plat that he shows here, and he shows the different utility providers. You need to change it. You've got Brownsburg listed 6 times on there.
Any further questions for the petitioner? There are no further questions. We'll move on to public comment.
Thank you.
Would anybody like to speak as to this particular agenda item? And Bill, could you remind us how much time each petitioner has to speak?
Well, it's a 10-minute total. I think it's like 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
Hi, I need a PowerPoint brought up, please. Thank you.
If you could get your name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Tim Pettigrew. I'm at 8854 Prairie Trail in Prairie Manor Edition, so just to the north. Some of our concerns for this project, additional traffic congestion on 900 East. We've been here through multiple projects talking about trying to get in and out of our neighborhood. This is actually going to make it worse. So we're adding approximately 68 more cars coming in and out of this local area. It's a problem now. We're adding all kind of restaurants to it in the future, and a lot of traffic comes right down 900, and we can't get out of our neighborhood. Housing density is too large based upon the property parcels compared to our neighborhood. We're at 1.1, now you're talking going to 3. You know, there needs to be some compromise there. Rental houses would result in the devaluation of existing surrounding properties. That's our properties. So location, location, location. If you're next to the ocean, you're going to pay for the house. If you're next to rentals, it's going to cost you. Lack of upkeep of rental properties over time causing devaluation of our surrounding properties. So I've got some other information along that line to talk to you about. Elizabeth Warren, Senator from Massachusetts, back in January of 2002, sent a letter to the CEO saying that American Homes for Rent has played a major role in keeping affordable housing out of reach for American families. Consider the history of complaints made against you by your tenants for cutting corners on maintenance requests and excessive fees. I fear poor business practices have also contributed to your increased revenue. And I'll go into that later. We also have.
Keep in mind that we have 10 minutes for everyone to speak.
Yes, I understand.
Thank you.
So this is from the annual report on 2021, page 42. You see the core revenues, and you also see a line item called tenant charges. And you look at those numbers, that's a little over 13.7%. You look at the annual report for 2019, page 48. You look at total revenues, customer chargebacks, again, over 13%. 2018 annual report, page 46. You've got the breakdown from 2014 to 2018. And again, customer chargebacks, again, you're over 13%. So here's a summary chart, and basically it's a breakdown. The percent of revenue started out when in 2014, only 3.7%. Now they're consistent above 13%, pushing 14. These charges occur after the customer moves out. So if you take a look at the 2017 to 2021 annual report, you see the total number of employees with the company. So employee turnover rate, 36.8% turnover. What does that tell you about the company? So you look at the rental properties. The rental properties, again, you're roughly just shy of 30% turnover of those properties. So in 2021 annual report, page 2, as a partnership, the operating partner is not subject to U.S. federal income tax on our income. Instead, each of the operating partners, including American Homes for Rent, is allocated and may be required to pay tax with respect to its share of the operating partner income. So you take a look out on the internet, the customer reviews, roughly we have a weighted of a total of 1,411 reviews, and the average was 1.78 out of 5 stars. So there's another company called Comparability. Their range was from -100 is the worst rating to +100. American Homes for Rent was rated -87. So 93% of the people were known as detractors that said, do not go with these people. I also took a look at the American Homes for Rent employee reviews. Looking at Glassdoor.com, there were 522 reviews. Their own previous employees were rated at 1.8 stars. We are opposed to this project as submitted, and it should be stopped. This project is not in the best interest for the citizens of Avon. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else signed up to speak?
Jennifer Howard.
Okay.
I'm Jennifer Howard, and I live at 8809 Prairie Trail. My property will back up to this project. And I submitted a letter. I hope you've all taken the time to read it and look at the reviews that I submitted. I won't go into that because Tim already did that, but I back up pretty much everything that Tim said in regards to the traffic. And I don't want to duplicate it because I know you asked us not to, but the traffic issues. We were told that there would be a traffic study done with the last 2 projects, and they were withdrawn, so that traffic study was never done. So we contend that that still needs to be done. And our property values are just what we're looking out for. So again, I don't want to duplicate what Tim said, but that's it. So if you've taken the time to read my letter, you got all my issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person?
Dinesh Patel.
My name is Dinesh Patel. I am living 8879 Prairie Trail behind the project. That's my home there. I am totally against this project due to excessive traffic on the 900 East. Also, my property value going to be dropped too. That's why I invest my money in the beginning. So I'm against for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next?
James Thomas.
Hello, James Thomas, 7380 Autumn Court. A lot of my issues were addressed by the first speaker, getting into the fact that, American Homes for Rent continues to make more money, rent prices keep on going up, and they continue to move into suburban areas and take away homes that will never actually be occupied by the individual or owned by the individual that occupies the home. In 2020, Jack Cornigan acknowledged that the available MLS inventory was low. So in response to that, they've engaged with developers in Avon and around the country to actually build neighborhoods that will never actually have owner-occupied residences there. And they're not the only company that does this. Progress Residential, right, which is owned by a hedge fund, has engaged with Onyx and East to do the exact same thing in Indianapolis, create neighborhoods that will never have people living in those homes that actually own them. I'm against this type of development. I'm not against development in the town of Avon because I believe it's important that we diversify our tax base. But if we are going to bring in good quality jobs and good quality developers to the town of Avon, we cannot continue to build neighborhoods that will never have people that actually have skin in the game, and that's ownership of the property that they live in.
Thank you. Next.
Try to keep this fairly brief. Vlado Mlakic, 8899 Prairie Trail. We live pretty much straight north of the church. While the first speaker pretty much took care of most concerns, Costco's traffic has made 900 pretty much inaccessible. Our neighborhood, it takes upwards of 5 minutes sometimes to get in and out because 900 has become so busy, especially down here where 900 intersects with 36. That stoplight does not correlate at all with traffic. It does not use any kind of sensors. It seems to be timed on a very short timer, and that left turn lane is always stacked all the way back into was that Charles or whatever that Costco street is, causing constant traffic backups. Even when you want to go west on US 36, you're having to cut through Costco's parking lot to even go there. So adding additional homes right here, which is going to cause additional traffic, cause 900 to back up even more. Initially, when we bought that property on Prairie Trail, we were told that the 900 was going to get expanded. Nothing has been done about that. Traffic is unimaginable, absolutely terrible. On top of that, while I'm not opposed to having houses built in that area, I am very opposed to it being by American Homes for Rent. Going through, looking at all the reviews, they have terrible reviews, absolutely terrible. Social media has made it so easy for anybody to just voice their opinions and track down companies that do them wrong. So even on Facebook, there is a group called Tenants of American Homes for Rent. Just nothing but lack of maintenance, lack of coming to fix problems, water damage that isn't fixed. I mean, siding that's falling apart. Nobody's willing to fix it. It's getting the runaround constantly. Better Business Bureau, they have a 1-star rating. On Yelp, a 1-star rating. Google, that was like a 3-star rating. I mean, just terrible all around. So while I'm not opposed to there being properties there, having them congested into tight little boxes that will lower the value of all homes around. And I think we have a lot of properties going in around Avon, 10th Street, 200 North. There's new additions going up everywhere. So having that little addition of just straight rental homes being brought up by a company that's shoddy at best, in my opinion, and especially based on the tenants that have lived there, that's kind of their opinion as well. I don't think that's the best location or the best company to be bringing into Avon at all.
Thank you. Next. Okay, is there anybody else present who would like to speak as to this agenda item? Having nobody step forward, the public comment period for this agenda item is closed. Would the petitioner like to provide 5 minutes of rebuttal?
We would. Obviously, we've had multiple public hearings here in the town of Avon about American Homes, and have heard a lot of criticism of the fact that the company offers a home option for renters. That is the business that we're engaged in, and do it very well. The largest homeowner in the United States, and to take a sample of those individuals who complain that amount to less than 1% of the total tenants that we have at any one time is not a fair representation, not an accurate representation at all of the company or its reputation. And I think the best evidence of that is that American Homes has a waiting list on virtually all its properties across the United States. It's repeatedly stated here that we have a poor Better Business Bureau rating. And I'm going to say it again. You can Google it yourself. Our Better Business Bureau rating is an A+. It's been voted one of the finest companies to work for in the country. It's been voted one of America's most trusted companies. And it doesn't pay federal income tax as an entity because it's owned by fellow Americans who own a partnership interest in the company and receive a dividend the same way you might be a shareholder in Eli Lilly or other companies that are publicly traded. All that being what it is, none of those factors have anything to do with what we're here to do tonight, which is this is a proposal that meets or exceeds each one of the criteria for plat approval. We have no greater density than what's permitted by right under the ordinance. And by approving this project, you'll make 34 homes available for individuals and families who would like to make Avon their home in a brand new home that's available for rent. We think that's a good thing as far as attracting talent to the community. And for all those reasons, we would respectfully ask your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, could you just provide us with a little quick TED Talk with regards to our role when it comes to whether or not properties are owner occupied or rental properties?
Well, in the rezones, you were allowed to take things like that into account, which you did and the town council did. But this is now a by right zoning R2. The owners or the petitioners in this case have a right to develop R2 under your ordinance. The only issue tonight for platting, preliminary plat, is simply whether their plat as submitted complies with your ordinance. Okay, this is not a rezone, so it's a really different sort of posture. And so as we talked about in your training, you know that the only question is whether the layout of the development is consistent with your ordinance. A lot of what you've heard tonight and we've heard before, as important as it may be, is not really relevant to this decision about a preliminary plat. And the law says that when presented with a compliant plat, upon your review of that plat, then the approval is ministerial, which means it's not discretionary, that you don't have the right to just do what you want to do with this plat submission. If it's compliant, that you are required by law to approve it.
And by law, we are not allowed to take into consideration whether or not these will be rental properties or owner occupied?
That's correct. It's not one of the requirements of your ordinance. And again, when I think a couple of the parties mentioned, or the petitioner mentioned, and maybe one of the remonstrators, is that you've heard these issues before when there were rezone proposals. You as the Plan Commission heard that, and that was part of your consideration. But your ordinance, when you look at platting, how land is subdivided, how big are the lots, is there road access? The things that are required, things that are relevant tonight are really just lot area, lot size, road access, tangents of curves on the road, preliminary drainage plans, things that are really pretty mechanical.
Thank you.
So,
Discussion.
yeah, if this is a ministerial, are we allowed to impose conditions?
You can require your standard conditions because on this case, for example, as Mr. Peebles has noted, he has conditions related to this architecture enhancement, which homes can be on which lots, that sort of thing, which I think are very important. Beyond that, you generally can only impose conditions that relate to a nonconformity. So I do not recommend that. You can ask the petitioner for commitments, much as has been worked out about the path. That's really a commitment now that will be made a condition. But that's my recommendation to you.
So the path shouldn't be part of any motion then as a condition?
No, it should. What we heard was the petitioner said that they would agree
to do the 6-foot colored concrete, that they will do that voluntarily. It's not required by our ordinance. And so since they've agreed to that, you should include it if that's what you want.
Same
But that's a
with the-
commitment.
is
That's
that-
a commitment they've made, not a condition being imposed.
Okay, so that would be the same for the emergency access point that they've.
That's right,
stated
commitment.
So it could be included in any motion.
Yeah, I think it should be included because it's been offered.
Okay. So if this isn't the right place for the remonstrators to bring up the issues that we heard tonight, Bill, when is that? When would that be the right place for the remonstrators to come and talk about their issues that they brought up? Because if we're just looking at primary plat, what's the next phase? So that they're,
I mean, the standards that the objections that they've raised don't have any real relation to the ordinance requirements. It's a perfectly good remonstrance for a rezoning petition or a plan unit development, but plat petition, there was nothing brought up that showed how the development is inconsistent with the ordinance requirements.
so I guess the question I have is this residential development or is it rental development like apartment buildings? Because if we know it's going to be, if it's going to be rentals, or is that immaterial?
Well, it's single-family dwellings by definition. The ordinance doesn't specify rental or ownership, so I mean, it's a single-family dwelling development. It's not multifamily merely because the properties are being rented.
So the distinction between multifamily and single family doesn't have to do with who gets the monthly money, a mortgage company or a landlord.
Yeah, it's a
It
number
has
of
to
units
do-
in the building.
So you could have what we would look at as an apartment complex, but if they are units for sale, it would be considered still multifamily.
Yeah, I mean, and we have that. A lot of times these townhome developments are 4 and 6 unit dwellings. Those are considered multifamily dwellings by the ordinance, which is why they're only permitted in the R4 and R5 zoning districts. This one being the C or R2 zoning district, a single family dwelling is permitted. And this is just a community of single family dwellings. It's the number of units in the structure. In this case, each structure has one dwelling unit in it.
Is there anything in our ordinances that relates to rental properties versus owner-occupied properties?
No, we avoid that like the plague.
And why would that be?
You run into some problems.
With federal law, I'm assuming?
And it's one of the things you could run into.
Housing discrimination, okay.
Your ordinance doesn't deal with this issue at all. You have a mobile home section, no requirement that those are owned. There are some, we don't have a lot of these here, but there are some multifamily buildings in this country that are all owned. They're all owned. None of them are rented. They're very expensive. They're multifamily, maybe 14 stories high, but they're all owned. The horizontal condominiums are some, and most restrictions as to whether it's owner occupied are in private covenants within subdivisions. And again, those are private agreements that people make, and that's where you see those. And again, I understand why people might be concerned about that, but again, in your ordinance does not consider that to be a relevant factor. There are legal reasons why that is the case. And I think if you went from community to community, you would find that other communities like yours also do not make a distinction about who owns the unit. They focus just on, is it a single family dwelling? Is there going to be one family there? Are there going to be two families? Is it multifamily? Is it a duplex, a quadplex? But you would know, going from ordinance to ordinance, community to community, that you will not see that issue addressed as it has been addressed by some remonstrators, because there are federal discrimination laws in housing that would, conflict with any effort to try to focus on that. But the idea is that over time, rental properties have changed a lot. That's not why your ordinance doesn't mention it at all. It has to do with discrimination laws. And I don't think there's anything unusual about your ordinance. That absence is not unusual. I wouldn't want you to think so. But again, for this case, again, the time to consider that was at the rezone where you look at responsible growth and development and all those issues. You did. So what the petitioner did is retreated away from an R4 ask and went back to what it was already zoned as, R2. And if they can fit in there, which they can, as they've shown you, then they don't have to come in and talk about all of the factors that you would look at a rezone. So Mr. Gugelberger, to your question, a rezone is when you bring these things up, not at a plat. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Discussion.
Talk about the architectural standards. Are there, what's the definition? Are they meeting our enhanced architectural standards, or are they creating their own enhanced architectural standards?
They're meeting ours. We reviewed, we reviewed all 9 proposed elevations, and all we simply do is take the table in the ordinance, we go through the elevations, and we make sure that they've checked all the blocks on there, and once they've hit a certain threshold, 12 points, it complies.
So with that then, what about stacking in driveways? They meet our architectural standards. If you park across the sidewalk, that's an ordinance violation.
Yeah, these would be public sidewalks and public streets in this development. So yes, if they cross or obstruct a sidewalk or a trail, then yes, that would be a ordinance violation.
I guess I do want to call out one thing that I was surprised is the installation of the emergency access drive. That's the first time I've seen that type of an option. And I think that's innovative on that. It gives you an access point that's really not an access point, but is there if you need it. So that kind of surprised me. I thought it was
clever.
innovative.
Any further discussion?
Mr. President, may I? Just to follow up on what Mr. Gugelberger said, I remember a case we had here where we approved that same thing. And I drive by it all the time, and you cannot tell it's there. And I know it's there because I remember the case, and I remember thinking, what is that going to look like? You cannot, because it's just grass. And even after all, that was about 10 years ago, even after all these years, you still cannot, you don't know it's there. The fire department obviously knows, but it's not gated. It looks like just grass. It looks like open space a little bit, but you can't tell that those pavers are there. So it is a great option for everyone, really. It's a great option for everyone.
Any further discussion on this agenda item? If we have no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion. I'll entertain a motion. We do need to make a decision on this tonight.
I make a motion that we approve map P 23-02 Oak Grove's request for approval of the major subdivision primary plat to develop a single-family residential development containing 34 lots on 11.2 acres, 11.02 acres, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report on file, except that condition 2 shall be amended to read, a 6-foot colored concrete path shall be substituted for the 5-foot concrete sidewalk from County Road 900 East to the east-west connecting trail into the Satori Point PUD. And I would also like to add the emergency easement between lots
2 and 3.
2 and 3 as outlined in the primary plat by the petitioner.
Second.
Having received a motion and a second, We'll take a vote.
Catherine Ransberg,
4.
Paul Guckenberger,
4.
Bill Reed,
4.
Greg Zuzen,
4.
Dave Kaufman,
4.
Jennifer Spencer.
4.
Motion carries.
Okay. Let's move on. Is there any other business that the commission needs to address? Committee reports.
The BZA met last week. We approved a variance to allow the Pana Donuts drive-through to be reoriented. We denied a variance request for a wall sign. And that's all I've got for you.
What about the Lamar Sign Company?
Lamar billboard signs were continued at that meeting. They'll be at the next meeting.
Is there a reason why it was continued? Did they request?
They requested it. Their legal counsel couldn't make it to that meeting. So it'll be there in April.
Any further committee reports?
Redevelopment Commission met last Monday. In addition to approving several invoices, we also had an update regarding funding that had been allocated for Ivy Tech some time back, and 100 South update, and also delivery of annual reports.
Okay. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 24th, 2023 at 6:30. Is there any additional information we need to share for the good of the order? If not, meeting adjourned.